Welcome back to the Jesus Coffee Yoga podcast, where we talk about Jesus, yoga, and we drink a little coffee or something. And we like to talk to teachers just like you, who, whether maybe you're new, if you're new here, welcome. Or maybe you've been teaching for a while and you just find yourself needing a little bit of help along the way. So today's conversation actually is going to be just about that. We're going to talk about what it looks like when we kind of feel ourselves needing a change, and how to get the right people and the right voices in our minds and in our head and in our life to help us make those changes. So today, I'm so excited. One of my greatest mentors, I have the honor of having her. We're actually on retreat right now, which is really fun. I have the honor of sitting down with her and having this conversation, because everything you see or everything I do, all of that I get to be a part of has her fingerprints all over it, because she has literally held my hand for all of my baby steps along the way. And I just want to share a little bit about what that looks like for me, and how it was intentional to put myself in Sarah's space. So Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so excited.
Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Sarah Hall. I have been teaching yoga for 19 years, and I live in Oklahoma City. I'm also a therapist counselor, married with 4 children, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to just kind of hash this out and see where we end up.
I love it. And I love, fun fact, Sarah was one of my yoga teachers when I was in training. Yeah. And I think I remember the first time I experienced your leadership. Like, I think it was on one of our calls, because we had, a bunch of calls. And I just remember some of the language you used to share whatever it was we were learning. It may have just been posture breakdowns or whatever, but I remember feeling very drawn in by the way that you spoke to leaders specifically. Like, it wasn't just like a person who's learning to do this thing. You really spoke to the leaders in us. And so I just kind of chased you around after that. So thankfully you only lived a couple of hours from where I'm at. And as a new yoga teacher, I found myself, we had a studio. I moved, and we tried to keep the studio going, and I was in this new place. A lot of things I had experienced a lot of loss at one time. And I remember reaching out to Sarah, because you were doing a series in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want to come. Can I come and just serve? So I would get there, early. I would help you set up and do anything you needed and help you tear down. And I learned so much just by being there. And I continued to do that. Like, she was doing retreats, and I'm like, can I come and serve? Like, I just want to be there. And I think there's so much power in that. And then, of course, you worked with me one-on-one in a really hard season of my life. But there's so much power in that mentor and mentee relationship. And I think something that is obvious to me, and maybe not to everyone, is it's important for us to seek them out.
Yes.
Right? Like, I feel like so many times, like, we expect people to just, let me take you under my wing. And it's like, a lot of people maybe are willing to do that, but like, you have to be intentional to put yourself in their space, like, and make sure it's worth their time. So I wasn't just like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And it's like, my time is where you didn't know me. But like, if I show up and I'm just there kind of helping, like, we're having conversations and it's not slowing you down from doing anything. So thank you for your leadership in my life and for who you are to me, not just in the leadership world or yoga business and all of that, but just as a human to me. You've made me a better human. And so I'm glad that you're here. And I thought maybe we could talk to maybe those teachers who find themselves in that place. So again, maybe just starting to teach, or they're teaching and it was going great and now it's not. And it's like, I need to make this change, or I'm not sure when to make this change, or I'm scared to make this change. I don't even know what I want to do. Like, just kind of speaking to that.
Yeah. I mean, wow, right? Like, well, there's so much. And I think because we've encountered on so many different levels and so many different seasons that, it's hard to kind of narrow down like where to start there. But I think, like anything, if you have anyone in your life that you look up to, that you are interested in what they're doing, if you are curious about, like, you're watching people lead retreats and you're like, that's where I want to be. I want to go there. Well, then you need to reach out to those people. And I know that can be hard.
Yes.
We're uncomfortable with it. But the truth is, most people can be responsible for their own margin and boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so if you reach out, and again, just offering yourself, which you did beautifully, because it was like natural for you to be like, let me just jump into this thing you're already doing. come alongside and help you, which made it an easy yes for me because I'm like, well, that's nothing off my shoulders, but also very helpful. And it did also posture me to start being more intentional about helping my other teachers in the room and the environment to kind of come up and learn and, just kind of make your carbon copy. So it's kind of goes up and down, right? The mentorship, and then you're mentoring others beneath you. And so I think for me, I did learn a lot from Johnny Goodmanson with when we were in Holy Yoga, man, she was so, so good at anatomy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want to know more about that. So I would connect with her to figure that out, and ask her, what are you doing? Do you have these resources? What are you reading? What are you learning from? To try to grab hold of those things. Now, I will say because I know my brain is automatically going to that person who's like, I can't think of anybody to ask, right? Well, maybe there's just nobody in my community. I'm the first one here doing yoga. And I mean, I've been there. I opened my studio in a Christian studio at that in a season when there was 2 yoga places in Oklahoma, and they were not doing that at all. Yeah. And so, but again, I would still just reach out to people who had done it, learn what I could learn, and then just kind of take those steps. But for that person who doesn't seem to have anyone right now, man, we live in a time where technology and resources are overflowing. Excuse. I mean, they're overflowing, you know? And so it's if you can't find a person, put it in your back pocket, pray, ask God to bring you someone that's tangible so you can learn from experience. But if you don't, there's nothing holding you back from taking a course online, from jumping into some sort of book or learning or reading or whatever so that you can kind of equip yourself to have new ideas. Because, man, we can get burnt out. Because that's usually when people are needing to change. It's because they've exhausted something and they're not accessing enough resource to see that there might be another way to do the same thing. It's kind of like the Red Sea in the middle of the no possibilities. We need some other people to tell us things we might be missing.
And a lot of times you experience the burnout feeling or this stuck feeling of I don't like where I am. And I see these 2 options and I don't like either of my options. Mm-hmm. And usually there's 20 more options you're just not seeing. Mm-hmm. And so we often need help from someone outside of our story to help kind of snap us out of that and show us what are those other options?
Yeah. That's a thing. And I know we can get into tunnel vision. I mean, all we are is what we have experienced and our perception and our perspective. And that is narrow. It just is. We're one person. Even if we've lived a lot of life, we're one person. And so we do need kind of some people to bounce ideas off of and just help us navigate. And again, find one of your friends. They don't necessarily have to be doing the same thing you're doing to be able to see something you don't see. So, it's have a brainstorming session with one of your best friends. Go sit down and just dump everything you're thinking or everything you've tried with your studio or with your class or with your community out on a piece of paper and just say, what do you see? What do you think? Because you would be amazed at how just a second set of eyes on your situation can expand the possibilities and perception. And if we're humble enough to just know, I'm not a problem. I'm not a failure just because this thing isn't working for me anymore or isn't working the way I thought it was going to work. But I have good access to some other people who can literally jump in and just see something I can't see for myself, and then I can run with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good posture, like you said, of someone who is seeking mentorship, because to say, what do you see that I can't see? Yeah. And they don't need to be in your space. They can ask some questions and get more clarity of whatever it is you guys are talking about. But in any area, what do you see that I don't see? And just being humble enough to accept that and receive that, because that person is not married to whatever is in front of you. Yes. They are not emotionally involved with whatever your studio or your business, your relationship, your whatever it is. And so they can say it much more objectively than you can, like you said, outside of that tunnel vision. And it truly is like a light bulb. Yes. I've had, even with Nick, I've had several conversations where I'll say, hey, I just want to run something by you. I'll say it and he'll ask a question and it's that's it. Like that's
Yes.
literally
That's
it.
the answer
Like
right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we kind of have to, know what questions to ask. And I think that would be a question to ask someone, a mentor, a coach, whoever, like a friend that will shoot it to you straight. Like you have to have, we all need those friends, a safe friend that will have your heart at best interest and, be honest with you. What do you see that I don't see? And I think I kind of want to go back a little bit to burnout. You mentioned that earlier. What are some things that kind of let us know we're getting there? Because I do think that when we start getting burnout, our decision making starts getting wonky. Right. Like it's like, do I just, like Nick said, do I go head down and just keep doing what I've always done, even if it's not working, or do I try something not knowing if it's going to work? So at least I know what's predictable here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to make a really broad sweep. There's a lot of nuance to this that I don't think we can dissect. But burnout traditionally means I have taken on more responsibility than I am actually being asked to take on or capable of taking on. So it's really good. Again, that's just you're burnt out. Assess everything, put everything down, like brain dump. What all am I offering? What all am I doing? How much am I giving? Where is my margin? And again, invite someone in to that process to just see, because so often, again, if we're the kind of people that we're like, no, we're givers. I'm just giving. But we don't see for ourselves that we haven't paused to tend to anything in ourselves in our own life in so long. So yeah, you're going to end up burnt out because you're taking responsibility for things that aren't yours. And there's nothing happening in your own internal soul work that's like refueling you and re-energizing you. Sometimes, right? Like we're at burnout because we are prideful to ask for help. We don't want to ask anyone for help. So we're trying to do everything by ourselves. And, I think it's God's kindness that puts a stop to that sometimes. Like, I don't think it's even just burnout. I think it's like, hey, I didn't make you to do all this by yourself. Would you please raise a hand and ask somebody in your community to help you? But I think a lot of it is going to be about just really stepping back and taking an analytical look at what you're doing to see what might be creating that sensation of burnout, and then reformat, pivot,
which also usually takes somebody, another person. I think that's kind of a constant theme of what we talk about here so much, is just that we need each other.
Yes.
We need each other so much, because we need the people who are asking the questions, what are the things that you're doing or not doing? If you're not tending to the garden of your own heart, how are you watering these other people? How are you doing that with integrity? Even for me, I'm like, how can I honestly do that when I know that I'm cracked and dry here? And or what can you let go of, or what, just asking some of those questions that we sometimes can't do because we're so close to the painting. It's when we step back. I love that. That idea of just taking inventory of what's working, what's not, why am I feeling this way? What do I really need? Who do I really need? And really just taking those steps to do that. It can feel overwhelming, I think. When it's I have all these ideas, I want to do all these things. And this used to be, and comparison's a big one. It used to be really good. Even comparing yourself to yourself. It's I remember when this used to be really successful and really productive, and now I'm pulling teeth to get people in here. Something's got to get, I'm tired, I'm burnt out. And honestly, even if you think people can't tell, the people you're serving, they can tell. They can tell if you're burnt out, and they're feeling that too. And I don't know, I don't want to go to a burnt out someone who's supposed to be pouring into me because it doesn't feel real.
Right. It's going to be inauthentic. Yeah. Well, and I think that that's the thing too, is again, getting to the end of ourselves sometimes takes that crash and burn right there, where you're talking about we've kind of got to get there sometimes to see things clearly and to want to make a pivot, like you're saying. But I don't know. I'm more fascinated at the fact that if you can name that you're in burnout, then I fully believe you can name what it is that's making you feel burnt out. And you can do that kind of separated outside of the business or the class or whatever. And I know for me personally, just to even tie that back around, it's of course things don't always work the same for the entirety of your life, because God is kind and he wants you to stretch and grow. Right. I remember the day when social media was so easy that I would launch a retreat and within 15 minutes it would be sold out because every one of my followers saw it. Now I have to post 6 days ahead of time, make sure I'm sending it out once a week. I'm putting it in front of them 25 times. I'm jumping up and down as much as I can. And that's uncomfortable for me. Yeah. But I really did have to step back again and ask some mentors and ask some friends, like, what's happening here? And most of them were willing to call me out and just be like, hey, you don't like this part. You don't want to sell yourself. So you're really resistant to wanting to do that. You wanted to go back the old way where you could just like mention it whisper it, and people showed up. And now you're like, I've got to promote myself.
Yes. And that's hard too. That is hard. Well, I was going to ask you, okay, so like aside from pride, as you were saying like a while ago, like ego and pride, I think definitely can get there. What are some other things that keep us from acknowledging that we're in burnout? You know what I mean? Like where it's like, why won't I just acknowledge that this is too much or I'm going too fast?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably pull into the therapist there because
go.
Right. I mean, the truth is that's probably a pattern everywhere in our life if it's showing up in this area. And I wish I could give like a real quick fix. Like, here's a 3-2-1 list of things you can do. But I do think when that's the case, it does kind of require you to almost have a full stop. And the kind of help you might need might look a little bit different than just like a mentor or a friend. You may actually need to invest in, hey, I keep finding myself here. And why do I keep finding myself here? And go ahead and take a step back and maybe work with, again, a coach, a professional therapist, counselor.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because I think sometimes it is just enough to pull back, reassess, have someone speak into you and draw some things out of you. But I think there are times, and that's why I wanted to go there, because I think there are times where it's like, no, I need some healing here.
Yeah.
I need some healing to my addiction to work or my addiction to producing. And then, you know, like my addiction to thinking that 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Which I know some people are like, what? It does equal 2. But, right. But it's like what got us here will not always get us there. Like you were talking. And so I think sometimes we're so married to a version of ourselves or a version of the way things were, or whatever it is, that will hold on to it for so long because that's just the way it's always been, that it will actually become destructive to us.
Yes.
And maybe that, like, it's not just like I'm tired, I've tried to do all these things. There are some deeper things. That's why I kind of wanted to hear your explanation on that as well.
Yeah.
So
because there's always wounds and patterns that are playing out in all things that we do.
Yeah.
And again, there's a kindness, I think, you know, you can get to your end of yourself in one place to do the work that covers all the places at once. But I think when you can identify that like actually this isn't just happening in this one area. And that's a good question to ask yourself. I think a reflective question is, am I only burnt out in this one area of my life? Because that's the one I think. If it's yes, you can do the simple, ask someone, get some perspective, do the brain dump, you know. But if it's like, I'm burnout everywhere, I'm going to say it's something definitely deeper that needs to be assessed.
That's good. And that's good. It's just helping us understand, like, when I'm asking myself these questions and these are the answers, now it's just more empowering to be like, okay, this isn't just I need a mentor. Like, you may need that too, but I may need other things as well. So I think sometimes I consume podcasts to learn and to like, I'm like, you know, I have several couple people that I follow and I like love it and I'm hearing it, but I still have these things that are happening and I'm like, whoa, what's there? What's that? And it's like, well, maybe it's not just a 1 + 1 = 2. It might be a 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5 plus a different version of the equation, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's, you know, there are other layers. And so even for our listeners, like, we want to give them practical tips. Like, step 1, like you said, 3, 2, 1, because that's a James Clear thing. Did you get that email? When you said it, I was like, I know that one. It's like, we just want to know what to do next. And I think sometimes asking the questions that I get to ask you very often, and that's why I wanted to ask it here, because sometimes the answer isn't just a 3, 2, 1, go. It's more of, there's other layers that need to be healed and seen and addressed and things like that. So
I think it's always important to remember that you may have to begin again over and over and over again. Like,
it's hard.
I think it's real, and it isn't something we're comfortable with as a culture. But I mean, I remember people asking me the question, like, how did you get your class so big? 19 years. Classes where there was one person. Classes where no one showed up. Events where 12 people showed up and you had hired musicians to come in and play and done a fundraiser and done all this stuff. And literally, like, if you were to, look at it constructively, like, failed, like 100%, like, did not work out. There's something about consistency, and that has to be true for you. If this is something you're passionate about doing, you have to accept the failures with the wins, because they're coming for you. There's not one person that is successful at what they do that has not heard no, that has not been rejected, that have not had no people show up to their class, that have not had people critique their class and tell them they were terrible. Like, I think, again, it's a kindness of God, but I think it's a part of life to understand that if you're going to succeed, you do fall down quite a bit.
Yep.
And if you can just kind of try to go, that doesn't mean I'm not qualified or I shouldn't be here, but it may mean, again, I need to re-strategize. Maybe I need to look at it differently, but I can start over. Yeah. And it doesn't diminish anything of my experience.
And I think you said I can and we can, but I think sometimes we forget that we need to.
Yes.
And it's so hard because, for me personally, I'll speak for myself. Like, I worked so hard to get here, and I feel confident. I feel like I finally feel qualified. I finally feel like I'm deserving of these people's money that they're paying me. Finally, and then it's like, start over, but I'm starting over doing something I've already learned. Like, to make that make sense. But there's so much. I love that you use the word failure, because something we say in our house is you win or you learn.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah. Like, you win or you learn. Failure is only a device to learn. Like, it's only a thing that we use, a tool to learn. And so, you do learn that. And I think if anyone would ask the people that we see on the socials or, sitting, even listening to our podcast, like, whatever, ask them. You ask those people, like, how did you do that? It's so easy to go to somebody and say, and want them to mentor you, whether it's in a formal, like, will you mentor me, like, conversation, or just you're putting yourself in their space, whether you're paying to be there, whatever you're doing, just getting in their space and learning, asking questions, whatever. Or you may not even know to ask those questions. How many times did you teach? I remember asking you, how many classes did you teach when you first started teaching? And I think you told me like 18 classes a week. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was like, never will I teach so many classes ever. Yeah. Like, I learned from you, even though I didn't have to go through myself. Yeah. But I learned, because I remember you saying like how burnt out you got, how hard that was. But that was what you did. Yep. And you figured it out along the way. Like, okay, this is too many. This is where burnout is. This is where what isn't working and all of that. And so even though I didn't even have to get to that level, I did have to find, where is that number for me? Yeah. Yeah. And so and that number may be different for us. Like, you can teach 12 classes, we can be fine. But for me, I'm like, if it's more than a whole work hour or work day, I'm done. So like, for me, it was about 8. Mm-hmm. So I can do 10, like, on the couple off weeks if I need to do extra. But if I'm teaching more than 8 classes, I feel like that's my capacity. And then I feel like I'm not able to do the other things that I love doing too. Yeah. So I remember you telling me, and so I'm like, well, no wonder she's so successful. She taught 18 classes a week, and she was getting all these reps. And then, you had told me, like, there are classes that people don't come to, like, people don't, or whatever. And it's like, ask those questions too, because you'll learn from these people that you look at and say, like, well, I want to do something like that, or I would love to do those things. Ask those questions too, like, tell me about the failures. Tell me about the times you were disappointed. Tell me about the times you were discouraged. Tell me about the times that you cried because you knew this is what God called you to do and nobody showed up. Yes. Like, tell me about that, and it's like, I'm thankful that I've gotten to hear those stories over our time together, but those are some things that's like, ask those questions too, or learn that about them.
Yes, because most people aren't going to offer that information up front. It's not intentional. It's just how we're hardwired as humans. Right. Like, I'm not going to tell you all the ways I've failed. Yeah. But if we're in a relationship and you ask me directly, I think most people have the authenticity to be like, of course I have been rejected. Of course nobody showed up. Of course I've messed up. I mean, ask them their most embarrassing stories. I mean, do it, because they're there for all of us.
I'm telling you. Well, I have loved our time together, and I'm so excited that we're not going anywhere. We're just going to keep traveling and doing retreats together and doing all the things together. And I've learned so much from you, and I've learned not just like how to do things, but how to be. Like, I've learned so much about who I am, because you truly have this gift for seeing what people can't see in themselves, and not just seeing it and acknowledging it, but like telling them. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I remember asking you a question one time, and you said it so plainly that I was like, why didn't I know that? Like I can think of what it is. I won't share it here, but and I was just like, she's so right. Like that's it. Like, and it's like that's a gift to have that friendship, and that doesn't come like with your just every once in a while. Like you have to really build and develop those relationships. But I know that I'm better for it, and I tell people all the time. Like I was telling Nick too. Like everything that I do has fingerprints of so many people who have impacted my life. Yeah. Like things that I get to be a part of. When people say like, this retreat or this class or this whatever, I'm like, but that is like this much of me. It's a whole lot of God and a bunch of other people who I have allowed to pour into me. And I just think that it's important. Yeah. And so that's why I thought this conversation would be good for those who may feel themselves kind of feeling like, okay, I'm burnt out, I'm stuck, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And just to hear kind of a back and forth conversation between someone with me, with someone that I have had those conversations with.
Yeah. It's just the always be a learner.
Yes.
Right.
Constant
always be a student. Man. Yeah.
Absolutely. In every way.
In every way.
I love it. Stay curious. You always say stay curious and kind. Is that right? Or compassion?
Compassionate.
Yeah. Compassionate. Curious and compassionate. I love that. Like constantly be a student of yourself and be compassionate in that too. So
I wanted to add one thought. Just something you said that stuck out was the amount of reps it takes. Like you got to put in the work. And I think some people just don't do it enough to get good at it. It's really unreasonable to think I can teach a couple classes and now I'm amazing. No, you heard how much she taught.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you just don't quit, you just keep putting in the work and get reps and just don't quit. You will win. Yeah. Like you will only lose if you quit, if you stop.
Well, and I think that like is the adage on all things. And it goes back to like, you're going to fall down, but practice. Yeah. Practice doesn't make perfect, but practice definitely makes you better and you learn and you grow. And so, yes, I practiced a lot of things. I practiced things I didn't even know would work. I practiced things that I knew would work. But yeah, there's something about just consistency in it. Unless you're clear that like God's like, nope, this is not it.
That's disobedience.
I'm going to tell you like consistency is key. But if you approach it with the mentality of, I'm practicing this instead of I'm trying to, again, like showcase something. I'm trying to be something. I'm trying to achieve something. But if you're just in practice all the time, man, you're going to be really good at what you do.
Well, and think of it even as a yoga teacher. Like when we teach students to do a headstand, there are some that can just pop up and do a headstand because they're them. But for the most part, like we teach them in layers, or they kind of, over the course of a couple of classes, we start teaching them. And then what do? We teach them to fall out.
Yes.
Right? So like we teach them when you fall, or for me, when I teach my students to fall, like I've learned that when I teach them to fall at the new, scary, kind of hard things, when I teach them to do that, they're more likely to try the next thing.
Yes.
And so I teach them, instead of back bending, like don't land on your feet, roll. Roll out of your back bend. If like tuck your chin and just roll onto your front neighbor's mat, like they'll be fine. Okay. And so like when I teach them to fall, or they practice falling, and I've even done that before, where I'm like, I teach them just to actually fall. Like I think that we're more likely to keep trying.
Yeah.
It's like keep trying, just practice falling, practice getting up.
Yeah. Well, you've eliminated part of the barrier that keeps us from failure. Like really, it's like the fear factor kind of gets taken out a little bit. And once you've fallen once, you're not as afraid of it next time.
Yeah, it's true. Because it's predictable. Yes. I know that I'll be okay.
Yeah,
and your brain doesn't know that until it tries it.
Yeah, I survived.
I survived. That's like literally it's like literally my anthem right now. Survived.
Yeah.
Like we survived.
I made it to the other side.
Yeah.
We think that God is going to do something when he tells us to obey, and we kind of like write out the story ourselves. Like, well, if I'm doing what God's called me to do, it's going to be successful. Did God say it was going to be successful, or did God tell you to do it? Because they're two different things. And so often it is to like sit in a space of, again, surrender. It's like, there were a lot of classes I showed up to that one student came and I was very tempted to be like, never mind, go home. Do you want to do this? But if I felt that like, God's like, no, it's for this person today. Like, do that. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be humble enough to just like sit with this one person and create this space that I know I feel called into doing. Then here I am. And so there's just got to be a humility of just like knowing, okay, I'm obedient to this because I feel called to it, and it doesn't guarantee me any sort of outcome, like most of life. I don't feel like God sits down with us and is like, hey, you're going to obey and it's going to be successful. I think he's like, you need to obey and I'm going to get you to the next spot.
Yeah. And the next spot may not be what we would consider successful.
No. Yeah. And just to even like, loop all the way back around. It's like when I first started walking with the Lord and being in ministry, I felt the invitation and the calling to start, teaching and doing retreats and all these things. The fruition of that did not come for many, many years later. And so, yeah, it's hard to wrestle down. Like, I felt called to this. Why didn't you give me a house on the first day that I stepped out and wanted a retreat house? Yeah. Why didn't you just give me $1 million to buy land? Mm-hmm. Well, because he had a different plan. And I'm here now, and I can tell you it's worth it, and that journey was worth it. But I couldn't have seen that my willingness to just keep taking a step forward with him was going to result in what it is now. And I wouldn't go back and change it.
Yeah. Well, we could probably sit here when we have sat and talked for hours and hours and hours, but thank you so much for being here. It's so good. And we're going to Costa Rica if you're hearing this before September of 2024.
Yes. There's only a few spots left. So
literally, I know I'm like,
they might be sold out by the time you see this.
They might. We are going.
But so, if not.
Anyways, yeah. If not, come hang out with us. But yes, you guys do the work that you need to do to get the people in your life that can pull out of you what you can't see, that can show you what you can't see, blind spots, all of those things, because it's so worth it. And hey, if you are finding yourself looking for mentorship, we have a program that does just that. It's called Next Steps. And if you will go to christiansyoga.com/nextsteps, you can get more information about that.